Uh, Hi. I just wanted to respond to Scott Ritter's, on one level, very amusing comments. I guess last night or the other night, he was bemoaning the fact that, like now there's no peace movement. From his, I don't know, like rah rah Ronald Reagan, U.S. Marines, but liberal Republican, sensible liberal Republican perspective. Yeah, I'd like to see what shoes you wear, Scott. Do you wear sensible shoes too? Uh, but uh, but your comment about the June 1982, million liberal Stalinist Menshevik peace march really struck me. I was, boy, how old was I? I was 10 in 1978. So, yeah, I must have been, I was 14 years old. I didn't go to that peace march. And I think really, yeah, because ironically, maybe, or, the reason being that, my parents were anti Soviet and anti communist, but, they were this weird kind of super liberal, social fascist, kind of. Uh, they had those politics, and I remember, my parents the morning after, reading the New York Times, of course, and there was a cute comment. They interviewed, I think it was like a boss in Streets and Sand in New York, and the reporter said, "Well, what about all the garbage and just the refuse from a million people on one day?" And the boss or the worker was like, "Oh well, but it's nice liberal garbage." The nice liberals, a million nice liberals. They probably piled up their garbage when it started to overflow, or maybe the ruling class of New York made sure to have an army of streets and sand workers out there in garbage trucks, following behind like they often do, at least in a better place. I hate to say it, but a better place like Chicago. Um, but that must have been quite a cute scene. But yeah, I didn't end up going to that because my parents, I guess, are, I don't know, that's weird. I guess we only went to Westpac a few times a year. Maybe my father just to spy on them or something. This fucking spooky was. Um, but it's weird. Like I would have thought that you know, well, they weren't really on the left, right? They were social fascists. So, but in regards to these, I would call them Stalinist Mensheviks. Um, Afterwards, I'm sure maybe you remember Scott, or maybe you don't, but I remember Alexander Coburn, I think, replying to the reactionary filth in America who were red baiting the Peace March. And, basically, um, they were saying, oh, the communists are behind it. Well, by that time, God, it was 1982. The CPUSA had been, as our friend Caleb Malpin points out, very usefully, from basically the 50s. The feds had heavily penetrated the CPUSA, and it was a shadow of its former self. But the difference was that the Soviet in 1982 the Soviet Union existed, right? Brezhnev had just died. I guess Andropov was either the head Soviet guy or whatever. He was the power, one of the powers behind the scenes. So you still had revisionist leadership of the Soviet Union. The liquidationist scum like Gorbachev, or was he? Yeah, he was liquidationist in the end, I guess. Hadn't taken over. So, and then you had, a platoon, let's call it, of CPUSA cadre, and beyond that, the broader, I don't know, let's call them left liberals. I mean, they're not anti-capitalist, or they weren't then. I would say overwhelmingly they weren't. I mean, there was the new left, but well, whatever. That gets very complicated. But um, so, but that kind of answers your question. It kind of makes me smile that, an all-American supporter of Ronald Reagan, but principled. You actually suffered for your beliefs, like my stupid mother suffered for her beliefs, and how my family suffered for her beliefs, and the fucking reactionary reptiles that run America, what they did, to you and my family, and all of that. But anyway, all that aside, the difference between 1982 and 2024 is, the Communist Party was just, it was marginalized in 82, but it still had, who knows, what was it, 2,000 members perhaps. And, that was also the Socialist Workers' Party at its height with its, I forget what they called their organization, but, they had a parallel organization which was very active during the Vietnam War. And apparently, from what I understand, they were able to get a whole lot done. You had a very receptive youth population then. But in 82, God, that was the revanche of, your hero Reagan, who basically, destroyed my mother's life. But, fuck him. I was so happy when he got shot. But anyway, the ironies of history, huh? Buddy. But, but in 82, you had your Stalinist Menshevik, CPUSA, and, they were able as, I don't know, maybe, how many soldiers are 2,000? Is that a platoon or brigade? Brigade, maybe, huh? I don't know. I never made it into the armed forces. So let's say a brigade of Stalinist Mensheviks and even, Stalinist, revolutionaries. In fact, I guess, I read some memoir of a, the guy who was the point peace organizer for the CPUSA, I think for that very march, and the Stalinist scum in the, not political committee, the national committee, let's call it, CC, the Politburo, not Politburo, the broader organ within the CPUSA sect. I guess, my former organization, we would call that the National Committee. Anyway, he was basically berated and humiliated by, these fucking toads, who were just, bureaucratic hacks. But this guy, despite that, he was dedicated to the cause, like you are, the cause of peace, and he put up with these reptile hacks in the National Committee of the CPUSA. And he also had, I guess, help from, the revisionists in the Soviet Union, which still existed then. And, that's the point, was, ironically for someone like yourself who, was a principled, patriotic, I would say right-winger, but I would include, liberals in that too. They're capitalists, so, that's the right, historically, since 100 or so years ago. Anyway, so, the Soviet Union, a degenerated worker state, existed then still. And, it was revisionist ideologically. It wasn't yet liquidationist like under Gorbachev, and then, oh God, under Yeltsin. Oh, what a filthy traitor he was. But, so, in 1982, all of the liberals, the petit bourgeois, chaff of America, of the New York State, East Coast metro region, the nice pusillanimous, I think the word is, just right-thinking, nowadays Biden voting, Hillary loving, Russiagate, supporting, scum we have now. They're children, people my age or younger. The Chads and the Karens, the Beckys and the Kyles. Um, they, their parents back then were less shit. They were shit, but they were less shit. And the CPUSA was shit, but it was, at least we had, the revisionist Soviet Union to help to fund and to help to organize this million liberal peace march in New York City to bring pressure on, God's president, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, even as fucking, stupid and, nasty as he was, like you point out, he wasn't as crazy as the presidents from George W. Bush on. And, I remember, I think it was Gore Vidal writing about George W. Bush, that when he became president, his father, the CIA scum, cried because he was the stupider Bush. And I guess it was Jeb Bush, maybe, who was supposed to, or I think it was Jeb Bush, who was supposed to be, the next in line to the throne. But, I think, as Trotsky pointed out about Tsar Nikolai, it doesn't matter, how smart the mope at the top is. The czar is, the president is, the king is. Once the system goes rotten, once, the historical material class forces, degenerate like they have in the last, 30, 40 years, no king, president, czar, or president, can save the rotten empire. And so I guess now, like Medvedev, a liberal himself, has pointed out, Medvedev had the advantages of growing up under, I guess he grew up under the Soviet system. We're about the same age, maybe. I forget if he's older or younger, but, I'm sure, he had more intelligent, capable people he grew up under, more, people, with heart. Right, even though they were revisionists, or maybe grandpa or dad may have murdered real revolutionaries, back in '37 or whatever. Even the Stalinists, the revisionists, had a depth to them, and and even Chernenko, it was pretty funny. I was laughing to my cousin in Moscow, and I said, "Oh yeah, Biden is our Chernenko," and she said, "Oh no, Chernenko was higher functioning, and certainly the Politburo of the almost dead Soviet Union was much higher functioning than Washington D.C. is today." And the reason is that you had 80-year-old men, who had been through some shit, right? The greatest generation, as Tom Brokaw said before lung cancer got him. God, I was just like, whatever, change the channel, because my father's part of that, but at the end of that generation, but he was a spook, and basically what politically a nothing, I would say. Yeah, a nothing, a gray blur, as Trotsky said about the Stalinists, applied to my father even more so, because my father worked under the imperialists, who are even, like now, their children and grandchildren, they're nothing, they're just refuse, right, chaff. And, that's what we've come to, that's the historical logic of American imperialism is, it produced liberals, who, they're the ideological manifestation of a system that is based upon zeros and ones, financial speculation. Such people were either shot here 100 years ago, or there's civil rights were stripped from them until they got a real job as a worker. And that's the last 30 years is the trash of the world here, and more so in the West. They've been able to come back and overthrow the hope of the future, destroy the future. Yeah, and that's it, right? Is the future has been destroyed, and Reagan and Bush, all of that scum helped to destroy it. Even my father. And even though or Mersheimer or Sachs, now they're crying. Why can't people be reasonable? Well, you can't be reasonable in a world run by trash and people who think the world runs on financial transactions and financial speculation and financial deals, and not like real buses and trains and food on the grocery shelves that isn't priced 200% more than it should be, and food, clothing, shelter, number one, but also civilization, culture, literature, music, all of that was degraded or destroyed. And over here, 15 million, probably many of them some of the most sensitive, cultured people in the Soviet Union. They were murdered by the bureaucratic traitors here, and the liberal scum of the West. We thought it was a great joke. Just like the Nazis, their boyfriends. The Nazis thought, Judeo-Bolshevism, we will smash it, and we will bring freedom. I'll have to listen to the Horst Wessel song. Like a dynamic, revolutionary freedom. To the Judeo-Bolshevist East. Yeah, which echoes what Bill Clinton and all of that scum was bringing to the destroyed Soviet Union. And so we've had 30, 40 years of freedom, and this is the result. Stupidity, idiocy, mass murder, no one left, to negotiate with. That was, it's a logical culmination of what the West started when they murdered the Jews, basically, or when they murdered Bolshevism, really, in 1937, I would say, or 1923, when the German masses refused to overthrow capitalism and come to the aid of the Soviet Republic and build a better, more rational world. Yeah. So I'm sorry to say, Scott, because you're one of the decent ones and you paid the price for your principles, but your friends, liberal, conservative, whatever they call themselves, capitalists, they got what they wanted, and this is the end result. So, it's a world not worth living for, today. I mean, maybe, who knows in future, if a working class in China or somewhere else can, rise up and refound civilization, okay, then that would inspire hope and for the future. But right now, the liberals, they've always been shit, since the time of the genocide against the Irish, there's no more Stalinist Mensheviks even to organize a million liberal march in New York City. So, and the liberals have lost their fucking minds. They've, I guess, come to the logical, historical endpoint of their ideology, which is basically some sort of deranged anti-Russian nationalism and suicidal ideation, with nuclear holocaust. Yeah, so, I would say let's hope, um, you know, people who are less reptile can prevail in Washington, D.C., I guess. But, I don't know, Scott. I mean, you know, for me, the last 30, 40 years, 50 years even, it's just been, a nightmare after a nightmare. There was no real, you know, city on the hill, American dream for me. And, the state, the society, I supported was destroyed 30 years ago. So, there's. I'm glad I'm not in, the land of the buy one, get one free anymore. But, what is there to live for, Scott? You tell me. Diet Coke. Yeah, I like the fact that, the colonial world is able to rebel against, these reptiles and bloodsuckers and murderers and liars. And, they're all losing their fucking minds back in, Turtle Island, occupied by Auschwitz guards. But, that's about it. So.